That's so exciting. I'm going to assume that we're pretty well here. There will probably be a couple more people filtering late. There usually are, but we're going to get rolling because the last I looked, the weather said we might have half an hour before it lets loose. So we're going to make the most of that. Ron Rosenstock, who is our featured artist this evening, has done many shows with us over the years. Ron travels to the amazing places on the earth, both for his own photography and to lead tours. He's been to, the list is very, very long. So I think of his work in two different ways. And we've done many shows, a few years. I think the last show we did of his was one that I named Land and Legend and asked Ron what he thought of that. And he said, well, that's me. So,
I like the legend part.
Yeah. So, and then last year, he came with a few images that he had taken of milkweed. And I was so blown away by them because they are microcosmic worlds. And I think always with Ron's work, it's easy to be seduced by how just flat out beautiful they are. But beyond that, beyond just beautiful, Ron is a real advocate for the living universe. He takes his role in introducing people to what he sees very seriously. And I guess maybe that's the most profound thing I have to say about Ron, is I have such respect for how he sees his role in the world as an advocate for beauty. So this show focuses very specifically on the milkweed, and you'll see it in various images around the room and also in the upper gallery. And I included a few of his black and white nature photos from the island as well, because that's certainly a big part of what he does. So I'm going to let him talk about the Monarch Project and all the other things that he does. And let's welcome Ron Rosenstock. You were supposed to remind me, please make sure your phones are turned off.
Starting off by forgetting my responsibility. Okay, I'm going to attempt to hold this. I might even move that over to the side. Well, thank you so much, Elaine. I don't know what to say. I'm like, thank you. I do feel, in a way, as Elaine mentioned, a little bit of like a missionary in a sense. I started bringing people on photographic tours back, well, the first one I did was like 1976, and it was to Ireland. And the way that came about, I had been teaching photography since '69 at a place called the Worcester Center for Crafts in Worcester, Mass. And I met Paul Caponegro, who lives in Cushing, Maine at the moment. He's been there for some years now. And Paul had just come back from he had a National Endowment of the Arts, and he'd been photographing all through the British Isles. And I saw his work from Ireland, and I just fell in love. There was something about Ireland and his work that it stirred something in me, and I felt I had to go there. And I went over for the first time. I believe it was the winter of '70, could have been the winter of '71. I remember spending Christmas there, in fact, with some friends in Ireland. And, I just loved it. And on the way home, I was a little bit depressed. And I said, why are you depressed, dummy? That's a little voice inside, calls me dummy, So finally, I realized I wanted to come back here. And then I got happy again. And I just planned my next trip. And I came back twice a year for a number of years until some of my students in '76 said, I'd love to go to Ireland with you. And I was kind of on the fence. I didn't know how that would work out. But I got so much energy from taking people to these beautiful places. It literally changed my entire life. And one thing led to another. That was a long time ago. And I work regularly in Morocco and Greenland and Iceland and Italy, and I just came back from New Zealand, and been in Peru, used to do the Galapagos a lot. The list goes on and on and on. And I mean, I can't do it all. The years have somehow passed while I was so busy photographing, that all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, it's time to slow down. But I'm going to slow down. I'm not going to stop. But I don't think I'll be doing any winter trips. But I'll still be doing a couple in the spring and a couple in the fall. And I love it. I love it. So I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version of my life. When I got into photography, which was like in the early 60s, and I got into it because I went with a friend. I grew up on Long Island, and I went with a friend when I was maybe 13 years old, so like probably late 50s, and I went to see a show at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City of Edward Weston. And I didn't know Weston from Easton, but I just fell in love with that work. It just moved me so, and I was hooked. I mean, from seeing Weston's work, it just totally moved me. And so I started photographing like very, very early. And I was at Boston University in 66, 67. And Minor White just came to town. He was teaching at MIT, and he was advertising for a workshop in his house where he lived in Arlington, Mass. So I did this workshop with Minor, and actually it was one of many workshops I did with Minor. And he really just set me in another direction. He had a very sort of Zen-orientated approach to photography, and that's kind of the way my life has gone, about just being so appreciative of so much that's out there. It reminds me of this wonderful quote by the Persian poet Rumi. He said, "Hear blessings dropping their blossoms around you." And you walk through the forest. Like the other day, I went out in the morning around the basin by the old two trees, and they're getting older like the rest of us, but it was, the sky just opened up. And it was just like a meditative moment of being so present, It reminds me of one of the quotes by Edward Weston. That's not it. So no, he when he was asked about making exposures for his wonderful photographs, he called it the flame of recognition. And it's that moment when the little voice in your head has kind of quieted down, and you're so attentive to what's out there, to the vibration of the ocean, of a forest. You just feel so in tune, So, I love coming here, as Elaine mentioned. It's been 40 years now that my wife Kathy and I came. We first came when the kids were very little, and that they're no longer little, and our grandchildren are no longer little either. So Kathy and I come by ourselves, and we do a lot of the same trails, but it's never the same, because nature constantly is changing, and the ocean is changing, and like at State Beach, the old huge driftwood that used to be up there is no longer there, and although I have photographs. It's interesting, as the years pass, a lot of my images are like historical documents, this kind of, but this is the same thing in Ireland, where I've been working since the 70s. In fact, Kathy and I owned a house there for 40 years that was like the workshop house. So we would have people come and stay in our house, and I'd lead workshops, and when I wasn't leading workshops, we had other people leading workshops, and we sold that about 10 years ago, basically because the gardener was making more money than I was. So it was time to sell. But I still go there, but we stay at a really nice hotel now, and it's just so much easier for me. So I do 1 or 2 trips a year to the west of Ireland still, and just really, really love it. Well, the milkweed project, that's what I came to talk about. It's interesting, you turn right, you turn left, and it just changes the rest of your life. Little things that could happen. So who knew? But a few years ago, we noticed milkweeds growing down the left side of our driveway. I mean, they just grew by themselves. I mean, obviously, they were just floating in the air and just happened to land on our property, and where we have some other nice flowers growing. And you know, Kathy brought I didn't really pay attention, to tell you the truth. I have to give more credit to Kathy for noticing these beautiful milkweeds. And then when the pods opened, you know, she showed me this and said, and I got so excited. Now, prior to this project, mostly I have done black and white. In fact, for 50 years, I did large format black and white, you know, starting with an 8x10 view camera. And then as the years went on, the camera got heavier somehow. So I went to a 4x5 view camera. And now I'm 100% digital and loving it. Although I never thought I'd switch in a million years. You know, I was so dedicated because, like, in the early years, I used to write to Ansel Adams when I had questions with a big camera, and he always responded very favorably. And he came to Boston, in fact, in about '72, a year or so before he passed away. So we actually met, and it was really, really wonderful connecting to Ansel Adams. But anyhow, that's sort of the, you know, the direction I went in, from Ansel's work and Edward Weston's work. I didn't think I would ever get into color, you know, and I saw these milkweeds and the subtleness, it was so beautiful. So I started doing some more research, you know, about color, and apparently, while I was doing black and white, I was doing color, but not really aware of it. You know, it just kind of happened. Every now and then I'd see something very colorful, and I wound up with enough color photographs that about a year ago I got well, actually, I think I had initiated this. I had sent an email to the director of the Fitchburg Art Museum in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. You know, kind of, you know, our paths had crossed for years, and I kind of asked to have an exhibition. I was very subtle. So he and the curator came to my studio, and they decided to give me a show called Ron Rosenstock's World of Color, to my surprise. And it was really quite a wonderful exhibition. You know, I started doing some more research, and I got some wonderful quotes about color that I brought in so I don't make a mistake. You know, I want to read this. The first one is by Henri Matisse. Color was not given to us in order that we should imitate nature. It was given to us so that we can express our emotions. And then the next one by Vincent van Gogh. One can speak poetry just by arranging colors well. And Paul Gauguin. Color, what a deep and mysterious language, the language of dreams. And one of my favorites, by one of my favorite painters, Georgia O'Keeffe, I found I could say things with color and shapes that I couldn't say any other way. All of these quotes pertain to my photography. So it kind of justified, you know, what I do in a sense. I didn't set out to do a project on milkweeds. You know, again, it just kind of happened. The milkweeds grew by nature, just sort of doing its thing, you know, and they were just so beautiful. And when Kathy pointed them out to me, I said, I gotta photograph this. Now, I'm giving Kathy more credit here. She, years ago, gave me this big black or dark walnut bowl. I think it's walnut. It's very dark, like a chopping bowl. So it's a great background to putting things in to photograph. You know, and this is just all done by window light. That's another thing I want to talk about, you know, about photography. Some of you know much more than I do about photography, I'm sure. I still have what I call a large format mentality. Like, keep it simple. I do not own Photoshop. I do not own Lightroom. Yet I do digital photography and somehow have managed to exhibit in galleries around the world and museums with the simplest of software, you know, digital darkroom stuff. I'm probably a bit of an antique. As my grandmother used to say, when talked about any technical stuff, she'd say, "I'm from the Old Testament." You know? So I fit into that category as well. I still have, for those of you who know about Mac computers, I still have Aperture. And the Aperture police have not taken it away from me yet. So I'm waiting for a knock on the door saying, "I'm Mr. Aperture." But it still works just fine. And I have a few other easier, like the Nick software is very intuitive and very easy. So I have just a few things. I could do everything and more that I did in the darkroom. You know, I mean, I do everything and more than Ansel Adams was able to do. You know, it's not about knowing everything about all the technique and getting the latest and greatest and always changing your operating system to the latest and greatest and almost starting from scratch again. You know, it's learning how to do something and do it well and stay with it. And photographs, like all art, it comes right from the heart and the head. You know, it doesn't come from all the technology that surrounds it. I mean, I have nothing against, well, I was going to say I have nothing against technology. That's not totally true. But I just prefer to keep it as simple as possible. And, you know, they say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So everything seems to be working. I'm getting the results I want, you know. And I always tell people the way to learn is to have a question. You know, you can't read all the manuals and think that's going to help you. If you have a question, then you do some research and you solve that particular problem, regardless of what it is. You know, it's like once every 3 years I start my chainsaw and I have to check on YouTube, you know, to get, you know, you pull this out, you turn this, and you know, you got to prime it, and I forget the order of things. And you know, if you don't do something all the time, you have to refresh your memory. You know, so, you know, like, I just do a few little things in my computer and I can get the results I want. And this may surprise you, I did this milkweed series with a little point-and-shoot camera. I didn't have I had a great big expensive camera, but I also have a little, it's called Canon G7X, little 20 megapixel, it could fit in my pocket. And I'm using it more and more because the quality is so good. So what more could you ask for?
So pixels and granularity didn't change much from the time you started digital?
Say again?
The granularity of all the extra pixels.
Yeah?
Did it change things as you...
No. See, what we used to call grain, now we call noise. First of all, there's noise reduction. Even Aperture has everything. You can kind of minimize the noise. And I'm not fine, I never really liked grainy images, and I'm always into more like the F64 group, nice and sharp from beginning to end. I don't do nothing against it, like selective focus. Everything is very clear in my work and very, very, very sharp and crisp. And you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to be able to do that. In fact, there are many people who travel with me now with an iPhone and get exquisite work. You know, again, this is technology. You really can do exceptionally good quality work. Cameras don't take photographs. People do. It has nothing to do with how much you spend. And that's another thing I used to tell my students. I taught at Clark University in Worcester for 30 years. And I used to tell them, you can't buy creativity. You can't buy something you're born with. You have to accept that creative spirit within yourself and know that it's there. And believe it, because it is there. You're born that way. But as we go through life, people tell us shoulds and shouldn'ts. You know, you shouldn't do this, you should do that. Good boys do this, you know. Boys don't cry, or, you know, all these sort of myths that kind of shape us, and we lose that creative spontaneity somehow. And it's like peeling an onion. We got to get off all these little skins and get back to being childlike again. And just, you know, you've seen children like on their mother's shoulder, and they're kind of looking all around, taking it all in. They're not judging. They're just taking it all in wonderfully. And that's what artists do. They take it all in without making judgments. Just really enjoying being there, being present to the moment. You know, there's a lot of talk now, a lot of books, you know, like Eckhart Tolle about being present to the moment. He's not the first one to say that. This goes back thousands of years, you know, the whole concept of, you know, we could call it spirituality, or, I mean, there's just, ancient religions all talk about, you know, so being really aware and present to like all the miracles around us, being present to the moment, you know, kind of, and like meditation is getting more and more popular as the years go by, but obviously that started again thousands of years ago, of trying to quiet the mind, that little voice inside of us that is so distracting because it constantly judges. I like this, I don't like that. You know, you look at artwork and, I think I crop off the left, you know, darken the right, do this and that. You know, as opposed to just sort of accepting what's there. You know, and that's what my life has been all about, anyhow. And that's what I've been teaching, you know, when I take these tours. And I was so lucky the way my life turned out. I mean, it really is just absolutely amazing. I mean, I hardly believe it myself. It's been so wonderful. You know, I mean, in the early years, Kathy and I started off with a company we called the Irish Photographic Workshop, and we did everything ourselves. Well, Kathy did more than I did. I had all the fun, she had all the work. I would be leading the tours, she'd be answering the phone. You know, it was before computers. So people would call, people would write, you have to write letters and deal with advertising reps and all this business. And, you know, and back then we used to do the airfare for people also, but nobody does that anymore. Everyone has to do their own. And it was a lot of work. And then out of the blue, I got a letter in the mail from a company that said, you know, we've seen your ad for Ireland for many years. Would you be interested in doing a trip to Kenya? And to me, wow, Kenya, that's like a foreign country. Ireland, to me, is not a foreign country. You know, I mean, it's easier for me to get to Ireland than to get to Vinyl Haven. From central Massachusetts. You know, I take a private limo to Logan Airport, go in the lounge, have a few drinks, get on the plane, you know, watch a movie, and I'm there. You know, it's much easier than getting up at 4 in the morning and hoping to make an early boat, you know. So Kenya seemed like, oh my God, this is amazing. But that was, again, the beginning of something else. Like, it was a whole other chapter of my life. And you know, they were so organized. All I had to do was meet people at the airport, and we worked with local guides, and I could help them with their photography, and the local guide knew all the places to go. You know, and from Kenya, then the next destination was the Galapagos, and then the next was Peru and you know, Machu Picchu, and then we did Ecuador, and they just kept on expanding. And finally, I said, wow, they're so much more organized and so much easier. So I actually gave them the Irish business, and they took over everything. And then the CEO of that company sold, and the company name changed, and it's a different CEO. And she's been there for maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing 15, 20 years now. And I had this idea about 6 or 7 years ago to bring groups to Vinyl Haven and do workshops. And I've done a number of them, staying at the best place in town, at Tidewater, obviously. And it's been really, really terrific. And now the company is expanding, and you'll see Kathleen Jacobs around town, because next September she's going to bring a group. She's a watercolor artist, you know. So we're adding Vinyl Haven's being added to this company as great destinations for artists, because it really is. It's just so and you know, you don't have to go through customs, you don't have to go through immigration. I mean, in New Zealand, you have to take your hiking boots off that they get fumigated, you know. I mean, I love New Zealand, but it is difficult to get there. Obviously, it's a long, long haul. And my flight over, I went over in April. I could do a whole lecture on, it's like a Monty Python kind of thing, you know, Monty Python goes to New Zealand. I mean, everything that could go wrong, and, you know, with weather-related cancellations, having to lay over, believe it or not, in Cleveland before we could get going. And, I mean, everything was a disaster. But you know, it normally should take like a day and a half, took about 3 days. But we got there, and absolutely gorgeous country. Just love New Zealand. I've been there maybe half a dozen times, and gorgeous. Every place I go, people often ask me, what's my favorite place? And I often say, just where I am is my favorite place. You know, because the world is just so wonderful, and every country I go to, I meet wonderful people. And that's another wonderful aspect of my job. I mean, I have really, really close friends in many, many different countries. You know, and a part of me is still, I feel like part of me is left in Ireland. You know, I have so many friends in Ireland, and in fact, I've been there for so many years, so many have passed on. I probably know more people who have passed on in Ireland than in America. Because, you know, I used to, when I was younger, go out almost every night. I think all of us did at some stage in our lives, you know, to the local pub. And, you know, but in Ireland, it was a lot of the same people would show up, we were all the same age, it was a big social thing, and there was always a music session, and I learned to play this Irish drum called the bodhrán. I learned maybe 40 years ago or more, probably more. And every time I go over, I play with a group of musicians and you know, just reconnect with the whole community, and it's just really fabulous. You know, so... anyhow, I really diverted from this, didn't I? I want to get back. I went on a circuitous route back to the milkweeds. You know, so I started this milkweed project, I don't know, just at the beginning of COVID, I guess, you know, when we couldn't travel anymore. And I just fell in love with the images, really. They just moved me because they are like little microcosmos, what's the word? Microcosmos. It's not coming out. You know what I mean? Obviously, I'm getting older here. Whoops. And every year it's a different crop of milkweed. And I continue to work with them every year, and I'll choose 2 or 3 a year. I mean, I do a lot of shooting, but I'm very selective. You know, I also, again, this is just me, and maybe it's because of working with a large format for so many years. You know, some people, they save everything in their camera, you know, all the images. I'll delete probably 90% before I'll even download it to my computer. So like, I'll look at, you know, I'll make many different images because I can. When it was with a large format, and if I were doing a milkweed, I would probably do maybe 2 or 3, you know, I would really take my time and that would be it. But, you know, I could spend a couple hours and maybe do 50 different images with my camera. You know, but obviously I'm not going to keep 50, I just want to get the images that somehow speak to me. And, you know, the language they speak is a mystery, but you could feel it. There's just something you could kind of sense. And that's how I do my editing. I often start off in the back of, you know, the back of the camera, the LED screen, and I'll go from one image to the other, and I'll say, this one has, you know, more information in it than this one. You know, this one is speaking louder than this one, so I'll delete this one. And I'll go down, and if I'm in doubt, I'll keep it. You know, and then eventually I'll download them into my computer, and then I'll probably delete half of them again. So I'm extremely selective, much more so than most of the people who travel with me. You know, some people, they keep everything thinking that someday they'll get back to it. I don't think we're gonna live that long, you know? Because you could shoot so much. I know people who have like thousands and thousands of images on external hard drives. And you know, you're never gonna get around to it. You know, there's just like, it's too much. Because it's so easy now to keep a gazillion images. So, saying that though, there are different reasons for photographing. When I'm, you know, my primary reason is to express my kind of inner feelings on Elaine's walls and, you know, in other galleries and occasional museum shows. That's like one of my primary motivations. But I discovered I don't know, maybe 20 years ago or more, when my mother was in an assisted living place, and I wanted to kind of entertain, so I told them I'd like to do a travelogue, like a little slide show. This is the old days with a real slide projector. And I did a slideshow for an assisted living place in Worcester, Massachusetts, and everybody really loved it. These are older folks who couldn't travel anymore, because of mobility issues, health issues. We all reach a certain age where you have to kind of look in the mirror and say, well, this is it, this is life, and here I am, but there's still so much they can enjoy. And they loved it so much, it put a bug in my bonnet here. And the program director said, there's a lot of assisted living places around that would enjoy this. Well, to make a long story short, I'll do maybe 1 or 2 a month, and I have for many, many years at senior centers and assisted living places all around New England. I think that just last week I did a program in the senior center in Wellesley, Massachusetts. And there's a place called Briarwood in Worcester, Mass. And I do like 1 a month, different travelogues. So, it's a little bit of a song and dance type of entertaining, along with the images. And it's such an appreciative audience, in all these places. There's like a lot of people who go there. Most of them are in their 80s and 90s, and they just, have traveled a lot, and they could often afterwards they'll come up and they'll tell me about their experiences, and and it's just really nice, the give and take thing. So it added a whole other dimension to my life, basically, So and that's why I got the little camera, as opposed to a full frame. Like I have a Canon Mark III and a Canon Mark IV. One is infrared and one is just regular. But I got the little G7X thinking I'll do more documentary work for the travelogues. But then I'm using it in a more creative way also, discovering, because it's great like with doing macro work. So I'm using this camera more and more and more and still enjoying it. So what I was getting at is that, I am shooting to express myself, as a creative artist, and I'm also doing, consciously making, documentary kind of travelogues, that I could put on for different groups, different senior citizens and senior centers, as well as, and I also do it in camera clubs. A lot of camera clubs are interested in, like photographing in Morocco, through the Sahara, which I love. For me, that's the highlight of my Morocco trip. We spent a couple of nights right in the dunes, 40 miles into the dunes, in a wonderful lodge. People think that you live just in Berber tents and all that. Well, this lodge has like a swimming pool and, like private rooms, air conditioned, you can get a sauna. Like it's really like a 4-star hotel in the middle of the Sahara. But, you walk out your door, you go through the dunes and you'll see, Tuareg, men on their camels, often talking on the cell phone too, which is kind of an interesting kind of thing to see, So I've been really fortunate in being able to just go to so many wonderful places in the world to photograph and to bring people and just give them great experiences that they just love, So I'm going to open it up to some questions. How are we doing here? Oh, I'm a little over.
But now you're in your side yard.
Say again?
Now you're in your side yard.
Oh, yeah. Now this is side of the house, and next year we have a new crop that planted themselves in the backyard also. So we have more sunflowers than milkweed than I ever thought we'd ever have, and of course it attracts the wonderful monarchs, which again is just very exciting. I mean, they're just such magical creatures, these monarchs. They're beautiful to look at, and I mean, their migratory route is like mind-boggling. Nature is filled with these miracles. We're always trying to figure things out as opposed to just accepting and going, It's just like, archaeologists are forever coming up with new theories about Stonehenge and this kind of stuff. And every time, National Geographic is famous for coming up with a definitive reason why, or how they got the stones there and how they built them and the purpose, until next year when they come up with a new kind of thing. So, we have this need inside of us to understand, as opposed to just accept and be grateful and just sort of love what's out there. So, yes?
And you mentioned that Kathy pointed this out as a thing to look at and photograph. That happens to me all the time. Not that I'm known for photography, but I have my iPhone with me usually. And my wife is a naturalist, and she's always pointing out, oh, there's a dragonfly, or there's a nest of eagles up there, or here's a slime mold. Look at that; it's only going to be there for 5 more hours. And so you don't, what you're talking about is like let the world quiet down. You could just have someone else who does that for you. Right? I mean,
I do.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying it's a general technique. Like, you don't have to do all of it. You can have someone else help.
Well, sharing, it makes a huge difference. I mean, my life, if I were a solo act, I wouldn't be here probably. Yeah. Really. Takes two to tango. Mm-hmm. There's so much more strength with two together. And we play off each other. Same thing with you and Janet. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Yes.
So one of the things I really love is this the juxtaposition of movement and also still life at the same time. Like each of these are like at a moment of movement. And so I guess I'm curious, when you're actually taking these photographs, to what extent do you play with that moment of movement? Do you blow on the milkweed? Do you ever play with that at all, or is it perfectly still?
Actually, perfectly still. Sometimes I'll put a few in a bowl, and I'll sort of twist it around, and I'll look through the camera. I'm twisting it because it's on a windowsill, so the light will fall on different parts of it. So that's the other. I could talk for another half an hour about that subject alone. That we don't photograph subject matter. We photograph the light that reflects off subject matter. Even though you think you're photographing subject matter, it's all about the light, and that's what makes these kind of special. I would just wait for the light just to be just right. And sometimes I had to wait till a cloud would just kind of come over the sun. And again, it's all on my windowsill in my studio, but it's all about the light. That's the important thing, but all artists know that. Again, it's the interpretation of the light. But I'm not blowing on anything. It does feel like there's motion because these things are just so light. I mean, they sometimes escape in my studio, and I can't catch them. They're like these little mosquitoes around, and you're trying to get the thing. And if you swat it and you miss, it takes off. And that's the way these little guys are. So, but I don't. It's pretty straightforward, except for making sure the light is really right.
Is it all reflected light, or is some of it passing through from the back?
It's all just natural light on a windowsill. I do occasionally. I have a window shade that lets light come through it, and it kind of diffuses the light. So if it's sun, if it's in the morning and sun is coming through the windows, and if it's too bright, too harsh, I can diffuse that just by pulling down my window shade. A lot of museums have these very soft window shades that just to kind of hold down the glare, and it diffuses the light a little bit. But I'm not working with, expensive diffusers and lights and that kind of thing.
Did you ever look at it from the outside, through the window?
I'm on the second floor. Not a bad idea, but I can't even watch the outside of the windows. I've been in the studio for like 10 years or more. So that diffuses the light, if you don't wash your windows, you'll get very, very soft light.
Joe knows all about that.
Well, folks, I think we did it. So thank you. Oh, I'm going to end with a commercial break. You know, if you want to know anything about these tours that I lead around the world, you know my name. It's ronrosenstock.com. And, you know, one big word, ronrosenstock.com. And you can go to the tour page and you'll see everything about all the different tours that I lead. That's the easy way of doing that. That was a brief commercial break. And, well, another little commercial break. Don't forget to see the work in the main gallery, you know, while you're here. And thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
And I'm just going to mention that Ron, this is actually Ron's 40th year coming to Vinalhaven. And in another week or so, he's going to be celebrating a kind of significant birthday. One of those big round numbers. It has an 8 in it, I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Ron.